We have already had a brief look at the technical assessment, but in this video we will examine the tabs in greater detail, and I will demonstrate how to fill it in. I'll start with tab TA1 and we'll work our way across to TA12. Tab TA1 contains plant information. This page is very straightforward. In this tab and in subsequent tabs, the white cells require information to be filled in, while the blue cells show the information that is requested. You'll notice at the bottom of TA1 there's a drop-down menu to select the year for the evaluation. Select the year for which the plant will be assessed. That is, the most recent year in which you have a full year's worth of data. Tab TA2 contains energy and production data. You'll see the various fuel types listed along the left-hand side, and the quantities and costs further to the right. The quantities and costs are given in both the assessment year, in this case 2010, and 1 year prior, just as a comparison between the two last years. This column contains LHVs, or lower heating values. These are given for some of the fuels, but can be overwritten if necessary, for example for fuels which have variable LHVs. And finally, as a reminder, as we mentioned in previous modules, we only include energy used as a fuel, not as a feedstock, in this section. Scroll down on this tab to see other sections to fill in. The next section has to do with non-purchased fuel and self-generated fuels such as electricity. Below that is a section having to do with production. This is where we enter the type of product we produce and the quantity and energy used for each one. And finally, in the bottom section, this is where we enter data having to do with the feedstock fuel. Tab TA3 is the Cooling and Heating Equipment tab. This is the first equipment-related tab. You'll soon see that the other tabs related to equipment include TA4 to TA10. I will go over some general tips for filling out the equipment tabs, which pertains to all of those tabs. The first thing we'll see at the very top is the I do not have this equipment checkbox. If your facility does not have any of this type of equipment, you simply check that box and go to the next section, in this case section B2 below. The first section that we can see has to do with detailed equipment data, where we actually enter specific data related to the equipment we find at the facility. The first column shows equipment nameplate capacity. Enter average value of up to 4 ranges. This allows us to enter different sizes of equipment. For a range of equipment sizes, for example from 10 to 20 kilowatts, we would enter an average value of 15 kilowatts. As we have seen before, in general we fill in the white cells. In some cases there are drop-down menus. As is the case for the units here, we can choose between kilowatts and megawatts. We enter the number of equipment for each of the size categories, and then answer some other questions related to that particular piece of equipment. In some cases, if a measure or opportunity is not feasible, we enter NTF. For example, in this column, we either enter the number of high-efficiency equipment, or if it's not feasible, then we enter NTF. NTF is entered when it is simply not possible to adopt the given measure. It may be that the technology is not available in your region, or it is not applicable to the particular piece of equipment in your plant. After the data has been entered for each individual piece of equipment, the annual energy use in gigajoules will be calculated. Check to ensure that the energy use appears. Below this top section having to do with the specific type of equipment on site, we have another section called the features questions. Each feature question is answered as either no implementation, partially adopted, fully adopted, or again, not technically feasible. These feature questions should be left blank if the plant does not have that particular type of equipment. For example, all of these questions are relating to the cooling and refrigeration compressors. If your plant does not have cooling units, then these questions would be left blank. The next tab, TA4, has to do with compression systems. This and the subsequent tabs are filled out in the same manner as TA3. The compression equipment is divided into two categories: air compressors used for pneumatic equipment and air compressors used for process. The same thing as the previous tab. You'll see the first section related to each piece of equipment at the facility, and below that, features questions. The next tab, TA5, has to do with motors, pumps, fans, and conveyors. I will just make a point about high efficiency equipment on this tab. For most of the equipment in this tool, the number of high efficiency equipment is asked. In some cases, high efficient is well defined, as in it's above a certain efficiency level and it is considered high efficient. In other cases, it is left to the discretion of the auditor. In the case of motor-related equipment, we also have a premium efficiency category, or class 1 of motors. The number of high efficient and premium efficient motors must not exceed the total number of equipment. In other words, a piece of equipment can be considered high or premium efficiency, but not both. One other thing to point out on this tab and the other tabs is if you scroll to the right, you'll see the library tab numbers for each of the opportunities given. The next tab is TA6. This is related to on-site transportation. It is very straightforward to fill out. The only thing I'll point out here is this refers to transport vehicles that are used within a facility, not vehicles that are used to travel back and forth from the facility to some other place. The next tab, TA7, deals with lighting. The total number of lamps is entered in column C, and of those, the total number of energy efficient lamps is entered in column D. I point this out because a common mistake is to leave total number of lamps blank if a number was entered for the number of high efficiency lamps. And the next tab is TA8, having to do with HVAC, or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. This pertains to heating and cooling for comfort purposes only. Any process-related heating and cooling belongs in TA3, which we have already covered. The next tab is TA9, or other process equipment. Most of the plant equipment should be applicable to enter into the other tabs, but this tab is provided for equipment that does not fit into any of the other categories found on the other tabs. TA10 has to do with ammonia-specific processes. This will be discussed in a later module. The next two tabs, TA11 and TA12, do not require any inputs. TA11 is the Energy Balance tab. We learned about the energy balance in Module 4, and this is what it looks like in the tool. What we can see is a breakdown of the energy consumed by the various fuel types across the top and by the various end uses along the left-hand column. The top chart shows the energy consumed by the various equipment as has been entered into tabs TA3 to TA10. The next section shows the purchased energy as was reported in tab TA2. Just as you have done in the exercise in Module 4, the adjustment factor is calculated here. And the new adjusted energy breakdown is shown below that, taking the adjustment factor into account. And finally, TA12 simply shows some conversion factors that are used throughout the tool, just for your own reference. That concludes this overview of the technical assessment. Later on in this module, you will have a chance to actually work with this technical assessment and fill it in using hypothetical plant data.